Afternoon, everybody. And this afternoon, in keeping with our general topic, is seeing opportunity in devastation. We're just waiting for Ed to arrive, but we can't actually wait. Ed is a master storyteller of note, and his anecdotes just literally rolls off his tongue. And what is interesting is that for our session today, what we want to explore is how to identify and thrive in a seller's market. So, there are a couple of things while we wait for Ed that we could think about. Is first and foremost, what is a seller's market? What do we mean by a seller's market, and why would we want to talk about identifying a seller's market and therefore thriving in a seller's market? What are the consequences if you do so? And the key is, after we explore what it actually is, we want to talk about is how do you identify a seller's market? I don't know about you, as finding the time to sit back, take a rest, evaluate what is going on. Our natural instinct when we are trying to drive sales, drive profits in our respective companies, we sometimes have a suspicion that we are not working hard enough, our teams are not working hard enough, and we want to crack the whip, whether we crack that whip on ourselves or whether we crack that whip on others. But instead of spending the time to reflect, right? And this space in terms of, all right, first and foremost, let me locate myself. In what market do I find myself? Because what is the opposite of a seller's market? It is a buyer's market. And hello, Ed. I was just giving a bit of background in terms of what we're going to be sharing today. Hello, Ed. Can you hear me?
Hello, Jacques. How are you doing? I'm sorry, I'm a few.
I was just positioning what we're going to be talking about today. And let me just recap quickly. The first one was, what is a seller's market? The second one is talking about how do you identify a seller's market. And I just said, well, when things are going tough in a business, generally, it is to spend that time to reflect. And if you find yourself in a buyer's market and competition is cutthroat, you have to cut your profits are down because your prices are not competitive enough. It's kind of where, as a business, you're finding that because those profit margins are shrinking, and just to kind of stay afloat, stay abreast, is buyers are so price sensitive that you can't actually offer anything that is value adding and therefore value for money, both for your for the buyer and for yourself. So Ed, or while you unmute, I just want to finish the last two questions. Is basically, how do you seize the opportunity in a seller's market, and how do you thrive in a seller's market? So starting from the very, very beginning, leading into, and I suspect this is going to be a topic that we will continue with, is once again, just to position it again, it is basically, how do you identify and thrive in a seller's market? And Ed, there's a few bullet points that we can consider. Is first and foremost to explain to the listeners what a seller's market is. How do you identify a seller's market once you understand what it is? And how do you seize the opportunity in a seller? There's one thing identifying, but how do you seize the opportunity? Carpe diem type of thing. And then how do you thrive in a seller's market? How do you make sure that your presence in a seller's market remains sustainable? Because, too much success can also lead to your downfall. Ed, you've got the floor.
Jacques, thank you. Again, apologies for being a little bit late here. A little bit of technical glitch. So, how do you thrive in the seller's market? Well, the first thing is, wow, how can you not thrive in a seller's market? Seller's market where there's more demand than there is supply. So buyers are queuing up to get what you have, and all you have to do is sit back, and your biggest problem is getting the money into the bank fast enough and maybe spending it fast enough. That's what it sounds like anyway. Um, of course, the reality is a little bit different. As soon as you are in that happy situation where buyers are queuing up to buy from you, then somebody else is going to notice and say, oh, look how easy that is. Let me build something that is exactly the same and sell it for 10 Rand cheaper and take all your buyers away from you. So you, you can have a very short term, very happy time. And that's happened in a number of markets around the world, as we know, where businesses have zoomed to enormous heights, especially in the IT space, where there's suddenly everybody wanted them. And then 6 months later, they weren't there at all, because some superior technology had superseded them. And they'd been so busy basking in their glory and believing in their immortality that they hadn't tried to do what they have to do, which is to kill their most successful product in due time and replace it with something even better.
Sure.
Now, there's exceptions to that. There are numerous exceptions to that as well, where they did that very successfully. Apple is an absolute example of doing that. And so are several other really prominent companies, but also a lot of very small companies. They're clothing companies that kill off their best sales line to replace it with a different fashion that everybody else will want. So that they don't just depend on this wave of popularity of a single product and or a single idea or even a single outlet or a single group of ideas or a single franchise or anything else that will eventually attract competition and probably quite a lot of competition because it is being so successful. And there are a lot of other markets where it hasn't worked that well. You know, if we just look at something simple like pizza makers, and there used to be lots and lots of very good independent pizza makers, and then along came the people with the marketing muscle, and they could put huge marketing effort in, and they could eliminate a lot of the independents, and then they would become the sole pizza manufacturer, and they had a unique, um, they had something which was different to all the other pizza manufacturers, and as we've seen, lots of them don't exist anymore. Bar franchises, another example. There are several of them that have been very successful and aren't on the market anymore. Simply because they stuck with their original formula. And they didn't try to do anything different to their original formula, which was a very good formula and a very, very successful one. You know, we can think of coffee bar chains that have done that. We can think of pub chains that have done that. We can think of all sorts, fast food chains that have done that. Pie franchises that have done that. They've had a very successful formula, and they've just stuck with the formula and they haven't created, and finally their popularity waned and they disappeared off the scene. So if you're in that unique space, what you need to do, what needs to keep you awake at night is not how fast you can spend your money. That you can always solve. What needs to keep you awake is to say, what can I do which will be so successful that it will kill my most successful product? Now there's a challenge for you. What can I do? What can I build? What can I create that will be so successful that it will absolutely wipe out my most successful product? Now, if you don't think that there are people around the world doing exactly that, then you should look at some of the very successful long-term companies and how they have evolved and changed and deliberately destroyed what was before in order to move into the next arena of this. And there's numerous ones of those, and some of them have even made a radical change in direction, like IBM, for it used to be the biggest computer manufacturer in the world by a country mile, and now don't make a single computer. It is a consulting organization, and a very successful one too. So yeah, mining groups have done that. All sorts of others. A lot of small businesses have done exactly the same thing. They've had this huge success. They probably had a bit of technology, a bit of equipment which is unique, and everybody wanted it. And once they had attracted competition and they had no other answers, they slowly just faded out of the picture. There's an example of a manufacturer that started up a plant for a commonly used building material in a small city that didn't have another plant that made those. And they were very successful because they were the only local manufacturer. And the big national manufacturer didn't like having a local successful competitor. So they trucked in suppliers from a manufacturing plant that was hundreds of kilometers away and then sold them at below cost, simply to drive the local manufacturer into bankruptcy. So it wasn't a nice business tactic to do, and it was certainly unethical and quite possibly illegal, but that's what they did. And that can happen to you as well. So keep thinking, keep moving. But I must say, overall, if you're in a seller's market, you're in typically a very good state. And so long as you're looking to the future and not just spending all the money that you're getting in now, you should be building up capital. You should be building up growth. You should be building up your R&D department like nothing before. You should be researching allied fields in the world and what technologies and thoughts and concepts were coming on board, what novel ideas were around. And if you were doing that, then you would be using this windfall cash, and I call it windfall cash, that is coming into a seller's market, because generally speaking, seller's markets aren't forever. Buyer's markets, on the other hand, are forever, or can be forever. So they're a bit of a different order of things.
So Ed, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
First, a comment. So what it sounds to me like is if you have several products, or you have a product and you've managed to launch that product, and you go into a growth life cycle on the product, is all these caveats, the warnings that you are reminding us of, the things that we need to look out for while we are experiencing growth with a particular product, success, and we are raking in the finances, is to know that what goes up does come down, and not to become complacent. That's the one thing. So I'm just curious though, in terms of if I'm in if I'm in a business, it's not about the product life cycle now in a death phase, but the industry as a whole is in a death phase. Is how do I pivot then into a seller's market when the industry life cycle is in its death phase?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we could look at a whole lot of industries, and really they operate exclusively in buyers markets, where there's a huge excess of supply over demand. And so
Mm.
buyers can pick and choose, and there are whole industries that operate that way. And we can talk about a few. But just before we go there, Jacques, I'd just like to comment on one thing that you said. The fact that you are growing does not necessarily mean that you're in the seller's market. You might just be doing, and it might have nothing to do with your product or even your services. You might just be doing everything right or enough things right to make a big success of your business. So there are many companies that sell very ordinary products that you could buy anywhere else, that people will drive past another supplier to go and buy from one particular supplier, because they get better service, because their pricing is better, because they have a better warranty service, because they get better advice at that supplier, because the supplier adds value that other suppliers don't. The
Mm.
supplier might have better marketing. They might be able to communicate the values of their products and services better than their competitors. Their sales force might be better trained and better skilled. Their management might be more customer aware than their competitors. So you can sit in almost in the middle of a buyer's market and grow very, very substantially. But you have to do most things right, or a lot of things right. And you don't have to have a unique, and you can grow very, very substantially. Many of the supermarkets chains did exactly the same as the original Pick and Pay chain. And look where they are today. Huge, giant organization. They didn't do anything different. They did exactly the same. They provided the same sort of products. They provided the same sort of level of service, the same selling methodology. But they just had something which drove people towards it. Maybe it was position. Maybe it was access to their facility. Maybe it was their advertising was more in tune with their markets than their competitors. Um, and there's so many other similar ideas, similar markets, where people have done something which is pretty well what everybody else has done, but they just do it better. Look around
So,
at filling stations, and you will notice that there's some filling stations where there's always 3 cars at the pumps and 4 waiting in the car. And then you go to another filling station half a kilometer away or a kilometer away, and everybody's sitting around looking bored. They're selling essentially the same commodity. Why is the one succeeding and the other not? Is it better positioned? Is its branding better? Is its add-on services better? Who knows? So, yeah, you can be growing very, very strongly, but not have the advantage of a seller's market. You've just carved out a big chunk of the buyers and made them think that they are operating in a seller's market by being very clever businessmen.
all right. So let's build on in terms of what you're saying. So, in that case, if when we considering the buyer's market, so that whole market, it's in its mature phase where if I'm listening correctly, differentiation is key. I gotta do so many different things in order for me to take away share from the rest of my competitors. But that would be in a mature market, right? So I take your point is that you can actually do very well in a mature market, even though and because you are taking away from the others, as opposed to then if I think about the seller's market, is that uh, the demand outstrips supply, so everybody benefits, everybody grows. So, but my
Mm.
question then, I want to refine it in this way: is, let's say we're not talking about a mature market. We're really talking about a market it's going through a death rattle. The demand for the products and services in that market generally is dying out. It's like, for example, what do I mean by this to help me articulate my question? Is like the video rental business, for example.
Mm. Video
Now,
rentals,
if
correct.
yes, like video
Um,
rentals, I would not even say differentiation would help you even in if I just think about so many years back and in terms of video rentals and things like that.
mm,
So if
mm.
if if you as a company are sitting in something like the video rental industry and you now need to pivot, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, so long as you don't try and do the same old in a different guise. To take a not very polite example, there's no sense in you moving from video rentals of feature films to becoming a pawn shop because people can buy the film online.
I suppose this is without being too precious, it's an option.
It would be an option. And it used to be an option in the early stages when
Hmm.
video rentals were getting overcrowded. Quite a few turned to become home rental shops,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
very successfully did. But it wouldn't work very well today. Yeah. So you're in a dying industry, and
correct.
you have to get out of that industry. Now your choices are: can you salvage something of the industry, your
Hmm.
knowledge, your skills, um, your customer base, and everything else that went with it, or do you just simply close your doors, sell your assets, and walk away from the industry? Or do you just stay there until it sucked up everything that you own and you quietly go out of business? And those are really
Hmm.
your three choices because the
Hmm.
industry itself is never going to come back. So then you have to think fairly radically. I don't know what the answer would be off the top of my head, but if I was sitting in this situation and I had to give a first reaction, I would say maybe I would think of turning my video rental place into a podcast studio. So here we've got a growing market with a high demand, or a Zoom studio where people are doing facilitation, people are doing online speaking, and all the rest of it. Where you could get the professional assistance. We understand the industry of electronic transmission of information. We understand the packaging and labeling and cataloging of it. We have a customer basis who don't want to. We have a customer base who don't want to buy; they want to rent. So we might be going into audio books, or we might be going into podcasts, or we might be going into Zoom studios. There are probably quite a few ways that you could change while preserving your core knowledge and perhaps some of your users. So now we don't rent um, videos anymore. What do people rent that you could market? What do they rent that you could market in their area? I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you put a lot of thought into it, you would find an answer to that. Toys
um,
might be an answer
mm,
because kids grow out of toys. Audiobooks might be an answer. There might be a whole pile of growing industries like audiobooks, like educational toys, like a whole lot of other facilities might be the way to go. You might have to change everything radically and actually close the store and have a different kind of facility, but there would be ways of doing it. But the whole goal would be to say, how do I keep some of my core knowledge and preferably my absolutely valuable customer base, and still um, oper- operate in an industry which is now growing, not dying. Or the other answer is get out now.
Okay. Exit.
If it's going to go down, um, if you're starting to really decline, there's an accountant saying which says your first loss is your best loss.
Yeah.
Take the first loss and just walk away, and go
It,
start somewhere else before it drains all of your capital and all of your energy and all of your self confidence.
exactly. So I'm actually tweaking my own curiosity further and just saying, oh, I'd like to understand what's happened to those video stores over the years, if they were able to pivot, maybe a case study, and share that with our listeners at some stage. Because I think,
Mm,
Netflix being Netflix, um, and essentially for a subscription fee, you are leasing movies multiple times
mm,
until a period expires. And I mean, how do you literally compete with that kind of stuff? And while you at in the convenience of either your home, but for your mobile convenience, you can be sitting and
mm,
streaming Netflix anywhere and everywhere, even, and download, if you're going to get into a plane, and whether it's domestic or international, you download all the movies either on your tablet or on your phone. And if you're not interested in watching whatever the airline has got to offer, you can sit and you can watch that, and it's all for one subscription price a month, or an
yeah,
annual price fee.
yeah.
And it's really interesting to me is that it seems like, I don't know when was the last time, because nobody looked to go rent anything, whether it's the VHS, Betamax, Blu-ray. I think that was like the last lot that I can remember when we would go out
Yeah.
and hire anything. Um, but talking about maybe an industry that Netflix did attack with such gusto, right? Is the movie industry, and what exactly has happened in the movie industry, because cinemas are still operating, for example.
Mm.
They're not cheap,
Although many
you
have
know.
closed down. Yeah.
Although many, but
Before,
some have survived, and
yeah.
it is just sort of that interesting dynamic. And to your point, earlier point, in terms of being in a buyer's market, when you find yourself in there, is they're seeking some sort of differentiation, because the entertainment industry is not one that's dying. This pandemic has brought us
No.
to a place where we're seeking even more entertainment and relief.
Mm. Growing like a mushroom. If you look on YouTube and see the amount of entertainment that's readily available by subscription or for free on YouTube, tons of
Uh-huh.
it, days, years worth of entertainment there. Stand-up comedians, playlists, poetry, films, you name it.
Hmm.
There's everything that you could possibly want. Slideshows, you name it, it's all there. So yeah, the entertainment industry is growing very, very quickly at the moment, and yeah, I think just the video industry didn't spot it in time. They kept trying to believe that they would survive. And Kodak is the classic example that just refused to believe that the world would change and move away from film cameras, and to its distress, it had to go from the second best known brand in the world to obscurity in just months. Just couldn't get their head around how to move away from that which had kept them so successful and so well known. Second best known brand name in the world after, at the time, Coca-Cola. Um, and they moved from that position to insolvency in a very, very short space of time.
Hmm.
And ironically, they own some of the patents for digital cameras. Couldn't
Yes.
bring
Oh,
themselves
Ed.
to spoil their best product.
Yes.
Just couldn't do it.
Um, Sorry, Ed, I was interrupting you there.
No, carry on. I'll finish it.
No, no, I just wanted to. I'm just watching how quickly the time has gone by.
Mm.
It's amazing. So, um, to those of us that are present, this is such a vast topic. So we are going to continue with this conversation, unpacking uh, the whole essence of thriving in a seller's market. There are so many dimensions to talk about, and so many stories to tell, and particularly, pick up on stories of companies, especially in the last 2 years, that have been able to do this quite well.
Mm.
So we want to
Mm.
continue with this conversation. We want to continue to listen to Ed while he tells these stories, and just tap into the wisdom that resides within him. Ed, when before you joined us, I just introduced you as such a master storyteller, and we definitely going to continue around this, and give inspiration to fellow entrepreneurs
Mm. Yeah.
as we continue. So thank you very much, Ed. Thank you for the conversation, and we will meet again next week, same time, same topic, within Seeing Opportunity in Devastation, Stories to Inspire.